I'm glad to be given the opportunity to deliver a Dhamma talk for Bandar Utama Buddhist Society again after quite a while. Last time I was here was during the Good Death workshop, and that's quite a while ago. I think that was in 2019. So I'm happy to be invited to give a talk today. The topic that I was given is walking the Noble Eightfold Path with the 7 Sappurisadhammas. When I first heard this, I wondered what these 7 Dhammas were, because this list of 7 doesn't seem to be familiar to me. So after I researched the suttas, I found that it is in Saṅgīti Sutta, Digha Nikaya, Sutta number 33, and also a mention of it in the next sutta, DN 34, the Sutra Sutta. Both of these suttas were delivered by Āyasmā Aggacitta. Now the circumstances behind the delivery of Saṅgīti Sutta is this. Shortly after the death of Niganta Nataputta, who is more popularly known as Mahavira in the Jaina tradition, because he was the founder of Jainism. Niganta Nataputta had just died, and his disciples were all quarreling among themselves, saying, "You don't know the Dhamma Vinaya, you're wrong, I'm right, you don't know what you're saying, you practice wrongly, I'm practicing correctly." So they were arguing among themselves, and it seems that at that time their dispensation seems to be falling apart. But I don't know how true that account is, whether it's biased towards the Buddha Sasana or not, because right now Jainism is still thriving in India. Anyway, on account of that incident, Āyasmā Aggacitta was rather concerned that something like that could happen to the Buddha Sasana after the Buddha's demise. And his concern was also shared by Āyasmā Ananda, who, in a separate sutta, Samagama Sutta, that is in the Majjhima Nikaya, MN 104. So Āyasmā Ananda approached the Buddha and told him about this, and he said that he was rather concerned that in future, after the Buddha passed away, a similar thing might happen. Like there might be some individuals who appeared to be quite compliant when the Buddha was still alive, but then they would act contrary to the Vinaya after his death. So the Buddha at that time appeased him and said that any controversy about the Vinaya is trifling compared to the controversy about the practice for enlightenment. And then he listed a whole list of procedures in order to settle disputes in the Sangha regarding the Vinaya. And he ended with metta, saying that if the monks practice the 6 Saraniya Dhammas, the 6 memorable Dhammas, then there should not be any occasion for concern about the harmony of the Sangha. And these 6 Saraniya Dhammas are mostly concerned with metta. And metta is the glue that brings harmony to a community. And of course also there is adherence to the communal rules and regulations and having the right view. That's in Samagama Sutta, MN 104. But in the case of Āyasmā Aggacitta, he got the monks together. He related this event to them and told them that before such a thing could happen, let us now preserve the Buddha Dhamma. And he gave a list of teachings in a numerical sequence, very much like the Anguttara Nikaya. The Anguttara Nikaya was compiled after the Buddha passed away, whereas this Saṅgīti Sutta was delivered during the Buddha's time, and the list also is just a bare list. There are lists of Dhammas that the Buddha taught, but there were no detailed explanations about them. The word Saṅgīti is also an interesting word. Saṅ plus Gīti. This is how the word is made up of. Saṅgīti can be broken up into Saṅ plus Gīti. Saṅ means together, and Gīti means singing. Now, perhaps some of you might be familiar with the word Gita. Not the guitar that we play, you know. The Indian word Gita. And you might be familiar with Bhagavad Gita, right? Gita means song. Giti means singing. They come from the same verb, gayati, to sing. Of course, this does not really mean that the monks were singing in a long drawn manner, because there is a particular rule where the Buddha forbade monks from singing the Dhamma in a long drawn manner. Which means to say, this Saṅgīti, this choral chanting, was done in a melodious way without breaking the norms of Pali pronunciation. If you are familiar with Pali chanting, you would know that in Pali chanting there are several elements that determine how a word is to be pronounced, depending on whether it is a double consonant, whether it is a long or short vowel. And so, as long as you follow these rules of pronunciation, then even though the chanting is melodious, it is okay, as long as we don't drag beyond these quantities, beyond this duration. Like, for example, a short A is half the length of time of a long A. The same for I and U. These are shorts. I, U, U. O and A are long, of course. And so there are various rules regarding Pali chanting. As long as we don't transgress the rules, it is okay to chant in a melodious way. And this is exactly what they did. That's why it's called a Saṅgīti Sutta, choral chanting. Interestingly, the so-called Great Councils is called Mahasaṅgīti, the Great Choral Chantings. So they rehearsed, or all of them recited the teachings of the Buddha in unison. I'm sure many of you would have played a game as a youth, as a young person in a Dhamma youth camp, where a person is given something to pass along the line, verbally, maybe a sentence. He will pass that sentence verbally to the next person, and the next person will pass on until the end of the line. And usually by the time he gets to the last person, it's all distorted. So that's what happens when you chant individually. But if everybody chants at once, then what will happen? The moment you make a mistake, it is very apparent. So that's one way of preserving the integrity of the Buddha's teachings, by chanting in unison. So that is the purpose of the Mahasaṅgīti, the so-called Great Councils, the Great Choral Chantings. So anyway, in this Saṅgīti Sutta, Āyasmā Aggacitta started with a set of 1, a set of 2s, a set of 3s, until the set of 10. Among the sets of 7s, then we have this 7 Sappurisadhamma, just as you would have the 7 bojjhangas, or the 7 factors of awakening. So what are these 7 Sappurisadhamma, and what do they mean? Sappurisa is sometimes translated as a good person, sometimes is translated as a superior person, And Dhamma means Dhamma. Actually here it refers to the qualities of a superior person or a good person. And they are altogether 7 qualities. These are: number 1, Dhammaññū; number 2, Attaññū; number 3, Attaññū; number 4, Mattaññū; number 5, Kālaññū; number 6, Parisaññū; and number 7, Puggalaññū. Dhammaññū means one who knows the Dhamma. Atthaññū means one who knows the meaning. Attaññū means one who knows oneself. Mattaññū means one who knows one's own measure, one who knows one's limits. Number 5, Kālaññū means one who knows the time. Parisaññū means one who knows the assembly. And finally, Puggalaññū means one who knows the individual. So these 7 qualities are listed in Saṅgīti Sutta, and is also repeated in the next sutta, the Suttara Sutta, also given by Āyasmā Aggacitta, probably a sequel to this one. It was just a simple list, a bare list without any elaborations. When I looked through the Tipitaka through an app, I found that there's also another place in the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Sevens, where an almost similar list of 7 qualities are mentioned. And the name of this sutta is called Dhammaññū Sutta, AN 7.68. This sutta is especially for bhikkhus. And I will use these elaborations that are given in this particular sutta, Dhammaññū Sutta, meant for bhikkhus, but I will adapt them for more general application for lay Buddhists. However, the last point, the last quality, Puggalaññū, or knowing the individual in the Sappurisadhamma, is phrased differently in Dhammaññū Sutta. In Dhammaññū Sutta, it is called Puggala Paro-Paraññū. What does that mean? Puggala means individual. Paro-para means inferior or superior and inferior. So one knows whether a person is superior or inferior in terms of past. So if we have the time, perhaps I will go through some of these. Now, in Dhammaññū Sutta, it is stated that a bhikkhu who possesses all these 7 qualities is ahunaya, pahunaya, anjalikaraniya, and so forth. All the qualities that you chant when you recollect the virtues of the Sangha. So a bhikkhu who possesses all these 7 qualities is worthy of offerings, worthy of respect, practices properly, and so forth. All these qualities are also ascribed to him. But let us get back to this Sappurisadhamma, which is more general in nature. And let's start off with the first one, Dhammaññū, one who knows the Dhamma. For bhikkhus, this means the 9-fold types of Dhamma that the Buddha had taught and classified in the suttas. These are the sutta, the gatha, the geya, the vyakarana, the jataka, udana, suttanipata, abhuta dhamma, and so forth. There are altogether 9 of them. So a bhikkhu who knows all of them is called a Dhammaññū. But don't talk about all of them. For lay people, just knowing one of them is a challenge by itself. So how much knowledge you really need in order to walk the Noble Eightfold Path, since our topic is all about walking the Noble Path with the 7 Sappurisadhammas. If we read the suttas, we find that invariably all non-bhikkhus, whether they are lay people or whether they are deities, all non-bhikkhus during the Buddha's time got enlightened, got awakened by listening to a Dhamma talk, usually by the Buddha. Or those who got enlightened anyway, not everybody got enlightened, but those who got enlightened by listening to a Dhamma talk, mostly by the Buddha himself. They don't need to study the whole Tipitaka, they don't need to study the Gathas and Abhidhamma and so forth. They just have to listen to one Dhamma talk and they can get awakened. And what's the secret behind that? There is actually a formula that the Buddha used. He called it a graduated Dhamma talk. Anupubbhikatha. He will start off by talking about dana, and then talking about the benefits of dana, of giving, and then talking about resulting in birth in a good place, sensual happiness, and then he will talk about the drawbacks of sensuality and the advantages of renunciation. And when he reaches a point, then he will gauge the mental state of the audience. And if he finds that the audience are already engaged in his talk and they are free from the 5 hindrances and their minds are gladdened and inspired, then he will preach the 4 Noble Truths. And that is the time when the Dhamma eye will arise in a listener who is sufficiently matured for awakening. So the first part of the talk was just to develop composure to some extent, because the Buddha said in one sutta, Nivarana Sutta, that if a person listens intently to a Dhamma talk, giving 100% attention, then the 5 hindrances are abandoned and the 7 factors of enlightenment are being developed to fulfillment. So when the 5 hindrances are abandoned, it means that you have a certain level of composure. And then when you talk about the 7 factors of awakening, one of them is samādhi. And the level of samādhi that is needed for awakening is at least the first jhana. So while one is listening intently to a Dhamma talk, one can actually get composure and qualify for the first jhana. So my understanding is that when the Buddha perceived, through his psychic power of course, that the people generally are already composed and their minds are ready, then he would preach the 4 Noble Truths. So at that point of time, because their mind is already composed, then they can absorb the teaching and get awakened. So essentially it's just the 4 Noble Truths. That is the main pillar of the Buddha's teachings. Everything else is the various supporting elements to help one understand and realize the 4 Noble Truths. So essentially, for a lay person, when you're talking about walking the Noble Full Path with the 7 Sappurisadhamma, for the first one, Dhammaññū, you just need to know the 4 Noble Truths. As simple as that, right? But it's not as simple as it seems. You know the 4 Noble Truths. There is suffering, the cause of suffering is craving or attachment, desire. There can be a cessation of suffering, and then there is a way that leads to the cessation of suffering. The formula is simple. When you go through the details, then it's a bit difficult. Because in order for you to attain cessation of suffering, you have to walk the Noble Eightfold Path. And that's where the problem starts. Then besides knowing the 4 Noble Truths, you also need to know what are the 8 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. Right? And the first factor of the Noble Eightfold Path is right view. And so you have to go about trying to find out what is right view, because if you have the wrong view and if you practice, you will get the wrong result, wrong liberation. So you need to know also what is right view. Alright, and that right view that you have will have to be remembered. You can learn about it, you can read about it, but if you don't remember it, and you don't remind yourself to put it into practice, then also it will not be of any use. So that is where right mindfulness comes in. Remembering right view, reminding yourself to put it into practice. Well, you might have a good memory. You know what right view is. And you remind yourself, but you also need right effort. Yeah, because you might know that it's wrong to have anger, that you should not be angry because it's an unwholesome mental state. But sometimes you can't help it because you are under the influence of the defilements. The defilements are too strong, they cause you to erupt, and after that only you have remorse. Oh, I caught it too late. I shouldn't have blown up. So that's not the right effort. You may know that it's unwholesome to have greed. Then you go into the shopping mall and you see something which is the real bargain, so cheap and looks so beautiful, but you don't really need it. Anyway, you just want it because it's a bargain. And you get a nice feeling of getting something that you want, not because you need it, but because it's a bargain. But anyway, you go ahead and buy it because you can afford to do so. That's not right effort. So you need to have right effort as well. So that's why these three things, right view, right mindfulness, and right effort, are called the executives of the Noble Eightfold Path. Only when these three are working, then the rest will follow. Otherwise, without these three, the rest may just akan ula, you know. Take a rest. Okay, so in practical terms, Dhammaññū for a layperson who wants to walk the Noble Eightfold Path actually means understanding the Four Noble Truths and the 8 path factors, learning all about this. The next quality is Attaññū, knowing the meaning. Some of you might have a ritual of going for Pali recitation. Maybe you do so every evening, or maybe you do so once a week or so. You can chant the Pali, but as you chant, your mind goes astray and think of this and that, or you may not exactly know the meaning of what you're chanting. So even though you learn the Dhamma, you know the Dhamma in terms of memorizing them, but if you don't know the meaning, that's not going to be very helpful. Okay, so you have to know the meaning. And that's also a problem actually, because if you don't understand Pali, you know the meaning based on the translation. And the translation is an interpretation of the translator. So unless the translator is a really very learned, objective and experienced person in terms of practice as well, his interpretation might not be very accurate or might simply be incorrect. So Attaññū is not really an easy quality to achieve, knowing the sense of what is being said. Well, of course, the best thing to do is to study Pali. And if you study Pali also, you need to start off by relying on the dictionary, right? And that is also an interpretation of those people who compiled the dictionary. So, besides that, then you need to study a lot of Pali and see how the words fit into various contexts. And then you understand how a particular term may mean different things according to different contexts. Alright, so Attaññū is not that easy unless you are lucky enough to get a competent teacher who is both qualified in theory and practice. If it's qualified in one but not in the other, it could be confusing and misleading, and it could lead you astray. Anyway, for people who are not Pali scholars and who are not practitioners at the same time, this is your karma. What to do? There's nothing much you can do about it, It's your good karma to meet with a good, competent teacher. It's your bad karma to meet with one who leads you astray. Okay, the next one is Attaññū, knowing yourself. Knowing yourself means knowing your qualities, your strengths and weaknesses. Since we are talking about practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, your strengths and weaknesses in relation to the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path. You may have heard the Dhamma preached by some teachers who emphasize the importance of samatha, or their understanding of samatha as fulfilling all the 4 jhanas and the arupas before you can start to practice vipassana. The argument can be very convincing because only when the mind is very concentrated and focused can it penetrate the truth. And so, being an idealist, you want to have the ideal conditions for awakening, so you try your best to attain all the jhanas and so forth before you start to practice vipassana. But then again, you have to know your own capabilities, your own limits. Do you have the talent, the inclination, the predisposition for doing samatha practice? Through the years of teaching, I know that there are some yogis who have a predisposition for samatha, and you can very easily spot that during their interviews, how they can go into deep samadhi very quickly. So these are the people who can follow that path of developing samadhi first before going on to vipassana. And yet there are others who cannot do that. They find that focusing on a single object of attention is boring, makes them fall asleep. But when you ask them to practice open mindfulness and look at things come and go and understand the 3 characteristics, understand cause, condition and effect, they all light up and they can get very interested and penetrate deeply into the Dhamma. So, it depends. You have to look at your own talents and predispositions. It's just like the arts and athletics. Some people are just born with that talent. So if you're a talented samatha meditator, then you should pursue that path. If not, then if you are more of an intellectual who gets more interest by looking at things and understanding how things work, then perhaps you should do vipassana. However, the way we understand meditation nowadays is not the only way to get samadhi. If you have attended my samatha vipassana workshop before, you might recall that I've talked about 2 suttas. One of them is called Vimutta Yatana Sutta. It is found in the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of 5, Sutta number 26. Vimutta Yatana, the basis of liberation. There the Buddha talked about 5 bases from which one can attain liberation. The first one is listening to the Dhamma. The second is teaching the Dhamma. The third is reciting the Dhamma that one has heard. The fourth is thinking about the Dhamma, considering the Dhamma, contemplating the Dhamma that one had learned by heart and recited. And the last one is learning the sign of samadhi, having grasped the sign of samadhi. So out of these 5 ways, 5 bases of liberation, only one of them is to meditation as we understand nowadays. The first is by listening to the Dhamma, the second is by teaching the Dhamma, the third is by reciting the Dhamma that one has heard, the fourth is contemplating, thinking about, examining the Dhamma that one has heard and recited. As I mentioned earlier, in the Anivarana Sutta, Samyutta Nikaya 46.38, in the Bujjanga Samyutta, the Buddha said that when one is listening intently to the Dhamma, then the 5 hindrances can be abandoned and the 7 factors of enlightenment brought to fulfillment. Right? I mentioned that earlier. So that can also bring about composure. So knowing oneself, knowing your talents, your temperaments, your predispositions, can help you to select a way that can get samadhi. Some of you might think that the only way to get samadhi is by meditation. You try to do meditation, but then you fall asleep, or you're very restless, you can't get samadhi. Well, all is not lost. You still have other methods. Listening to the Dhamma also can bring about samadhi. Nowadays, you can read about the Dhamma instead of listening, and then examine the Dhamma. So that can also bring about samadhi. So you must look at your own dispositions, your own inclinations, your own temperaments, and try to find the most optimum way to get samadhi. Then in Samadhi Bhavana Sutta, Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Force, Sutta number 41, the Buddha talked about the development of samadhi in 4 ways. The first one is through the jhanas, the first, second, third, fourth jhana. That is through formal meditation. And that brings about the result of dwelling happily or comfortably in the here and now. The second is by developing the perception of light. And when you do that, it will result in jnana dasana, which is usually translated as knowledge and vision. The third way of developing samadhi is by watching the mind. Knowing when feelings, thoughts and perceptions arise, persist and pass away. So what sort of result will this give you? So if you watch your mind, if you watch your feelings, thoughts and perceptions as they arise, persist and pass away, that will lead to sati sampajanya, mindfulness and clear awareness, or mindfulness and clear comprehension. Then the last one is contemplating how the 5 aggregates subject to clinging arise and pass away. If you want to know the difference between the third method of development of samadhi and the fourth, then I suggest that you watch my YouTube video on this topic under the Samatha and Vipassana workshop. I have explained the difference between the two in that video. Now, after this talk has been broadcast for the members of Bandar Utama Buddhist Society, I shall upload this video to YouTube and I shall provide the link for you so that you can easily access the YouTube video. So, knowing yourself is very important, to see your temperaments, your inclinations, your talents, and that will help you to select the best way that is suitable for you to attain samadhi. So understanding yourself is very important. Don't just follow the crowd. Don't just follow everybody because they want to do a certain type of meditation. Well, what works for them may not work for you. So you have to be more discreet when you select your own path. Then there are some people who have a more devotional aptitude rather than meditative. They are more devotional. You ask them to meditate, they'll fall asleep. You ask them to do a lot of social service, they will be very happy, and their mind can get composed just by helping others. So you have to understand your own talents, temperaments, before you select the path that is most suitable for you. So that is Attaññū, understanding yourself, knowing your own limitations, knowing your own weaknesses and strengths. I always tell my yogis, no need to compare. There's no basis for comparison between you and another person. Because the other person might have done his or her homework in a past life. But you just started this lifetime. How are you going to compare with them? There's no way you can compare. Every one of us has to walk at our own pace. We have to walk at our own pace, following the method that suits us best. Okay? So I always encourage people, go window shopping first. Go and try this method, try that method, and see which one fits you. Whatever fits you, whatever practice that you follow and that gives rise to more clarity of mind, to composure, to mindfulness, to improvement in your character, the reduction of greed, hatred and delusion, and then the increase of wholesome qualities like generosity, openness, acceptance, patience, loving kindness, the 4 Brahma Viharas. If these things increase and the defilements decrease, then you're on the right path. I've actually given a talk on that in BARRs many years ago. It's called Not Too Gullible, Not Too Shrewd, and it talks about how you can choose a suitable teacher or method for yourself. It's available now, I think, in SoundCloud, so if you want to know more about this, please go to SoundCloud and listen to that. Now we go on to the next quality, which is Mattaññū, knowing your own limits. For monks, this refers to the requisites that the faithful and devoted offer to them, that they should know their own limits and not ask for what is beyond the means of their supporters. For example, there might be very devoted supporters who come forward and make an open invitation. Bhante, if you need anything, please let me know. Yeah, but this is a trap, What happens if the monk says, I want a Mercedes? How are you going to do that? So usually I would tell my supporters that you have to be discreet when you make such an open invitation. You could say, Bhante, if you need anything allowable within my means, please let me know. Two caveats, allowable and within my means. Within my means here refer to your means in terms of financial resources, as well as your degree of faith. Yeah, whether you have enough faith in a person to give him what he asks for. Because there's one particular sutta where he said that a person who makes a promise to a renunciant in wanting to offer requisites, but then does not fulfill his promise, may end up being unsuccessful in his business enterprises. He will get a loss because he did not honor his promise. On the other hand, those who give what is asked for, then they will be as successful as they want to. So this is something which you need to bear in mind. If you want to make an open invitation, make sure you have these two caveats. What is allowable and within my means. Okay, so for lay people, what does that mean? Well, for lay people, that means that you also must know your own limits. We all know that the second noble truth says that desire, craving, attachment is the cause of suffering. Correct? The more desires you have, the more suffering awaits you. So how much desire are you willing or able to reduce or abandon as a layperson? Right? You have to know your own limits. Ideally, you should get rid of all desires, but it's not really practical as a layperson, because it is your desire that maintains your family. It is because of a desire of your obligation to your family members that you have to earn a livelihood and support them, and also desire that you have to support your own body free from disease to keep yourself healthy. There's all desires involved. So you need to have discretion to know your limits, to what degree you want to reduce your desires. And each person will have his own standards, right? And so you need to exercise your discretion, be truthful to yourself. If you really want to walk the Noble Eightfold Path, you know that you need to reduce defilements as much as you possibly can without affecting others adversely. For example, if you have already started a family and then you've got kids who are still growing up, but then you came into contact with the Dhamma only later, after you got married, after you got your kids, and perhaps due to some past cultivation, you made very good progress in your meditation, and you are inspired to renounce and devote your whole life to serious practice. Well, although this is a very wholesome desire, wholesome aspiration, but it's not practical, because you've already started a family. You have to make sure that you see them through, fulfill your responsibilities before you can contemplate on full-time renunciation. You can go for part-time renunciation, go on 8 precepts, go on a retreat, but you still need to go back. So you need to understand your own limits. That is Mattaññū. The next one is Kālaññū. Kālaññū here means knowing the time, knowing the right time to say things, to do things. Of course, this is not only confined to the Noble Eightfold Path, this is also very useful in your daily life. In fact, all these 7 qualities are really useful in your daily life. Because there are some Dhamma teachings given by the Buddha that are related to family life, related to worldly life. So if you know those Dhamma, you try to apply those principles in your daily life, they will also give you good results, beneficial results. So when you're talking about walking the Noble Eightfold Path, people who have this view, this idea that meditation can only be effective when you go on an intensive retreat. And you can only meditate when you sit down quietly with your eyes closed. So if you have that sort of attitude or understanding, then whenever you're not able to go on an intensive retreat, whenever you're not able to sit with your eyes closed, then you can't meditate. You can't practice. Well, what is meditation anyway? Meditation is an English word that is used to translate 2 words in the Pali language. One is jhana and the other one is bhavana. Jhana is a more formal practice of sitting meditation. In fact, jhana, when it's used generally in the suttas, it means meditation in general, formal meditation. Whereas bhavana is not confined to a formal setting. It can be informal too. For example, many of you are familiar with the sampajanya formula, or the details of how one should act with clear awareness in our daily activities. Correct? Yeah, you should act with clear awareness when you're walking, standing, sitting, when you are wearing your clothes, taking your bowl, when you're eating, when you're swallowing, when you're defecating, when you're urinating, whatever you're doing, you're supposed to act with clear awareness. That is also bhavana. That is also meditation, in a sense. Not that formal sort of meditation, but if you look at how the Buddha talks about the practice of sati sampajanya, it is not confined to a formal setting. Throughout the whole day, 24/7, as long as you are awake and alert. One of my devotees is a very ardent practitioner, and she tells people that she meditates 24/7, and people look at her as though she's crazy. And then she said, actually, she tries to practice mindfulness throughout the whole day, and that mindfulness goes on into her sleep. She tries to watch her breath as she falls asleep. And she tries to watch her first thought that arises the moment she wakes up. And because of the continuity of her mindfulness, she can even be mindful during her dreams. So mindfulness is not something confined to a formal situation, not just an intensive meditation retreat. In fact, if you practice daily mindfulness, that will really complement your practice when you go on intensive. They actually supplement one another. I've always said that the 4 hours of mindfulness, remember, recollect, remind, and retrospect, are equally applicable for daily life as well as for spiritual practice. And so when you want to develop this quality of knowing the time, knowing the right time to practice, then you can apply the 4 hours of mindfulness in your daily life. I also talked about the BARR Test. Some of you who have been following my teachings will know that I regularly emphasize the importance of applying the BARR Test. BARR is an acronym for beneficial, appropriate, relevant, and realistic. When you are able to catch your intentions when they arise in your mind, then you have a chance to process them. So you process them by applying the BARR Test to see whether these intentions, feelings, and perceptions can pass the BARR Test. If they don't pass the B or the A or the R or the last R, then you can jump to the spiritual last R, looking at them as anicca, dukkha, anatta, and also understanding the causes and conditions for their arising. Yeah, this is when you recycle all those intentions, feelings, and thoughts which are not beneficial, nor appropriate, nor relevant. Actually, if you're able to catch your intentions, most of the time you'll stop at the B, because once it's not beneficial, you don't have to find out whether it's appropriate, relevant, or realistic. Yeah. And so once it fails any one of the first 3, then you can jump to the last one, the spiritual last one, which is looking at it in terms of anicca, dukkha, anatta, and in terms of cause, condition, and effect. I've mentioned that although one can watch one's mind, understand that we have feelings, thoughts, and perceptions, that does not necessarily mean that you're walking the Noble Eightfold Path, because you may be identifying yourself with those feelings, thoughts, and perceptions. That would be wrong view. The right view is to look at all these feelings, thoughts, and perceptions that arise in your mind as not mine, not me, not myself. That's why I said in the beginning, having the right view is so important in order to walk the Noble Eightfold Path correctly. And also you need to remember the right view and apply it. Initially, there may not be insight. You are using your intellect to understand how your thoughts, feelings, and perceptions arise due to cause and condition. And then you apply this right view. This is not mine, not me, not myself. They arise due to cause and condition. But of course, it can be impactful only if you can really see through your personal direct experience the cause and condition for the arising of these thoughts, feelings, and perceptions. Now that will really give you a glimpse into anatta. And as you see that more often in your daily life, then it will change your mindset. Instead of becoming a control freak, then you begin to accept things as products of causes and conditions. But you can only do that if you have mindfulness, because you need mindfulness to catch what has just occurred in your mind. And then you need clear awareness in order to apply the BARR Test. And you also need mindfulness to remember the BARR Test and remind yourself to remember it, recollect it, and remind yourself to apply it in your daily life. So actually there is a lot of opportunity for you to practice the Noble Eightfold Path in your daily life. If you're talking about knowing the right time is all the time. Whenever you're awake, whenever you remember to do so. Of course, I'm not asking you to stop thinking altogether, because you live in a conceptual world and you need to think a lot in order to fulfill your worldly obligations and responsibilities. What I'm advocating is for you to have mindfulness and clear awareness so that you can catch those intentions in time and process them to decide whether they are productive or non-productive. So if they are non-productive, stop thinking. Come back to your senses. You can stop thinking, and then you can make use of the thought, the feeling, the perception as grist for the mill. Recycle the trash and look at them in terms of anicca, dukkha, anatta, in terms of cause, condition, and effect. Okay, so you don't stop thinking. Just because you have to think, it doesn't mean that you cannot practice. After all, applying the BARR Test involves thinking too. You have to think, you have to evaluate an intention to see whether it passes the BARR Test or not. So that is a form of thinking. So Kālaññū is a person who knows the time. So when is the time? I'm so busy. Well, you got a lot of time to practice. When you get up early in the morning, you make your bed, you wash yourself, you prepare for your breakfast, you take the transport to your place of work, you walk from where you park your car to your office. All these times you can practice mindfulness and clear awareness. Then you can go to the toilet. When you're in the toilet also you can practice. When you are taking a shower also you can practice. When you're eating alone also you can practice. In fact, eating is the best time to practice because all the six senses are active and you can watch how the mind is reacting to whatever is perceived at all the six senses. So Kālaññū means a person who knows the time, and the time is all the time. As long as you're awake. The problem is forgetting and also being lured by the defilements. Okay, that's Kālaññū. Then we go on to the next one, which is Parisaññū. That is in reference to the assembly that you are in the midst of. If you are in the midst of the Sangha members, you have to behave in a certain way. When you are in the midst of your colleagues, your business colleagues, you behave another way. When you are in the midst of your family, you behave another way. So you need to have the discretion to know how to modify your behavior according to the role that you are playing. But in terms of walking the Noble Eightfold Path, it's the same thing. How can you practice the Noble Eightfold Path in the midst of all these different gatherings of people? We all know the first Mangala, right? The first Mangala is not to associate with fools. The second is associating with the wise. Once I was leading some people to make an aspiration based on the Sri Lankan chant, Yimina punya kamena mame bala samagamo satang samagamo hotu javane bana patiya. By the power of the merit that I've done, let me associate with the wise until I attain Nibbana. And so somebody asked me, oh, this guy is not really a Buddhist. He happened to be among the guests who were attending a dana. So he asked me, what do you mean by fool? So I said, from the Buddhist point of view, a fool is somebody who doesn't have Buddhist values. And of course, when you are working and you're associating with your colleagues in the business world, many of them are not Buddhists, or they may be nominal Buddhists, but not practical Buddhists. They would have different values from you. So how can you practice the Noble Eightfold Path when you are in their presence? So this is something also you need to have some skill in doing. And some of you who have attended my talks before, listened to my talks or attended my retreats before would know of the bet and tip me formula for beneficial speech. So what is beneficial to you, what is timely, what is truthful, said politely, said with metta, these are things that should be said. If they don't pass the bet and tip me test, then don't say. So in the end, when you are in a gathering of non-Buddhists who are gossiping or speculating about some political events, what can you do? Just listen, hearing, see how your mind is reacting to all those things that they are saying, and smile. If you add anything, open your mouth and say something, it may not be beneficial speech. So you need to know when to keep mum and when to just listen and not just walk away, because sometimes you cannot just dissociate yourself completely from fools. Yeah, in the world, you are dealing with fools most of the time. So you need to have the tact. You need to be tactful enough how to relate to them without slighting them, without offending them, and yet also trying to practice the Noble Eightfold Path. The last one is Puggalaññū, knowing the individual. This is not explained. As I said, it is not explained in detail in Sappurisadhamma, but it explained in detail in the Dhammaññū Sutta. But that is something different because it's for bhikkhus only, and I don't think I have the time to go through them anyway. There are actually another 7 pairs of things that you need to know. With already 7 qualities in mind, another 7 pairs I think will be information overload. So I better not talk about that. Let me talk about something more simple. Puggalaññū, knowing the individual. Earlier on we talked about Dhammaññū and Attaññū, correct? Dhammaññū means knowing the Dhamma, and Attaññū means knowing the meaning. So it's not easy to know the Dhamma and know the meaning all by yourself. Even if you are a Pali scholar, you have to start learning Pali from somebody, right? And so you need to have Puggalaññū. You should know whom that you should associate with in order to learn the Dhamma. What sort of person he is? Is he reliable or not? Is he trustworthy? Is he competent in terms of theory and practice? Is he objective enough, or is he biased towards his own views or his own traditions? We have to look at all these things. And as I said earlier, I've already given a full-length talk on this called Not Too Gullible, Not Too Shrewd, where I talked about the qualities of a teacher that you should look out for, and also the Dhamma that is most appropriate for you. Okay, so these are the 7 qualities. Let me go through them again. The first one is Dhammaññū, one who knows the Dhamma. For monks, of course, that means all the Dhamma that the Buddha had taught. For lay people, the most essential is the Four Noble Truths. And in the Four Noble Truths, of course, you have the Noble Eightfold Path and all the path factors there. Then we go to Attaññū. Attaññū means you know the meaning, not just understand all these things by heart, memorize the teachings without knowing the meaning. And then you need to know the meaning of what they actually mean and how they can be put into practice for you to walk the Noble Eightfold Path. The third one is Attaññū, knowing yourself. What are your tendencies? What are your talents? What are your predispositions? And try to choose a practice that fits them best. Next one is Mattaññū, knowing the limit, your own limits in terms of more, how far do you want to go, how you want to walk the Noble Eightfold Path. It means abandoning craving. So how much craving, how much desire can you reduce practically without adversely affecting the people who are dependent on you. Next one is Kālaññū, knowing the right time to do things, to say, to practice the Dhamma, whether in an intensive situation or in daily life, whether when you are with fellow practicing Buddhists or when you are with non-Buddhists, which is going to be more often than with practicing Buddhists. Number 6 is Parisaññū, knowing how to practice in different gatherings of people, which is also associated with the Kālaññū, knowing the right time. Yes, and knowing the right time also means that you should revisit the meaning of this word meditation and open up your understanding to the idea that meditation is not limited to intensive situations, but it covers all aspects of your wakeful life. It is the practice of mindfulness and clear awareness, especially in terms of the 3 characteristics and cause, condition and effect. Alright, so you have to adapt your behavior according to the people that you are associating with at any given one time, whether it's your business colleagues, worldly people, or whether it's fellow practitioners. That is Parisaññū, having the discretion to modify our behavior accordingly. The final one is Puggalaññū, knowing the person that you are going to learn the Dhamma from, who is going to teach you the meaning so that you can practice it effectively in your daily life, walk the Noble Path, and attain liberation. As I said, there's no point comparing yourself with others. Each one of us is unique. Each one of us has to walk the Noble Eightfold Path according to our own pace, choosing the technique or the methods that suit us best as an individual. So I want to end the talk here today. Hope that all of you will be able to remember these 7 points and the elaboration of what they mean, so that you can walk the Noble Eightfold Path effectively and attain awakening smoothly and speedily.